Some stories are whispered, others are buried. This one, it came from a real confession, raw, personal, and unforgettable. Names have been changed, details reshaped, but the pain, that part's real. This is Confessions Reimagined, where true emotions become timeless tales. Now, let's begin with the wedding that never happened. She stood in front of the mirror, but it didn't feel like her own reflection. The face staring back wore all the right things: the hand-beaded gown with gold thread embroidery, the translucent veil gathered like mist on her shoulders, the soft blush that Grace had carefully blended beneath her cheekbones that morning. But beneath it all, her almond-shaped eyes were heavy, not with sleep, but with something older, something quieter. Grief. Not the screaming kind, the kind that simply just sits with you, quietly, uninvited. The room was hushed, a cathedral's dressing chamber, meant to house joy. Its tall windows were dressed in heavy velvet, but slivers of light managed to slip through, casting golden stripes across the marble floor. Dust floated lazily in the air, as though the room itself was holding its breath with her. On the nearby table lay her bouquet, cream roses and calla lilies, and beside it, carefully folded and sealed, was the letter, the one that wasn't in the wedding plan. Outside the doors, the orchestra was already warming up. She could hear the faint strains of a violin tuning itself, the steady click of someone's heels walking briskly down the corridor, and a child's giggle that was quickly hushed by a whispering adult. She had about 12 minutes before the church doors would open. It was strange, she thought, how everyone said this moment would be full of butterflies, joy, anticipation. But what she felt was not nervousness. It was silence. An unshakable stillness that had settled deep in her bones 3 nights ago. She hadn't spoken to Michael since. She hadn't said anything to anyone, really, not even Grace. There had been a kind of rehearsed magic to it all. The fittings, the planning, the hashtag their friends had made, hashtag Forever Chloe and Mike, the photo shoots, the cake tastings. She had smiled through it all. She had even laughed occasionally. But now, standing here with her veil slightly off-center and her heart split into pieces too tired to fall apart, she realized something. She looked like a bride, but she didn't feel like a woman about to be married. The mirror blinked back at her silently. A soft knock tapped at the door. Her mother's voice followed, muffled and warm. "Baby girl, everything okay?" She swallowed. Her throat was tight. She blinked once slowly. "I'm fine, Mom. Just giving myself a minute." "Okay, we're all set out here. Just tell me when you're ready." "Okay," she replied softly. The silence returned, and she just kept staring into the mirror, waiting for the reflection to say something she could believe. Grace had been her maid of honor by default, not because of obligation, but because she couldn't imagine anyone else by her side. They met in university, both studying literature, but from wildly different worlds. Grace was loud, magnetic, spontaneous. Chloe was quieter, drawn to poetry and quiet cafes. But where most saw contrast, they found chemistry, the kind of friendship that happened once in a lifetime, or so Chloe had believed. She remembered the first time Grace stood up for her. A group of boys had laughed at her natural hair during their first-year orientation. Grace had stepped between them and said, "Say that again, but this time to both of us." No one had laughed after that. From there, they became inseparable. Late-night reading marathons, broken-heart ice cream rituals, tearful prayers before exams, and whispered dreams about their futures. They had promised to be each other's bridesmaids, godmothers, and emergency contacts for life. And to her credit, Grace had been there through it all. Through Chloe's internship failures, through the heartbreak with Daniel, through the season she thought God had forgotten her. Grace had prayed with her, fasted with her, and celebrated her healing when Michael came along. That was the part that made it worse. Michael had met Chloe at a teaching seminar. He was tall, soft-spoken, and loved jazz. A quiet man with deep eyes and a sense of timing that made her feel safe. Grace had been the first person she introduced him to. She remembered how they laughed together that night, how Grace hugged her afterward and said, "Girl, this one's different. You look like at home." And she had believed that. She had held on to those words like an anchor. Grace approved. Grace loved him too. Not the way Chloe did, of course, but enough to make her feel like she wasn't walking blind. They had all shared dinners together, trips, inside jokes. Michael had once called Grace the sister I never had. She didn't mind. In fact, she was glad her two favorite people liked each other. That's the part betrayal never announces. It hides inside normal. It hides inside laughter. Looking back now, Chloe realized there were moments, subtle ones, but she had trusted Grace too much to assign suspicion to any of them. Like the time she caught them talking outside after her birthday dinner, just the two of them, smiling a little too softly. Grace had said they were planning something. Or the time Michael had forgotten something he said to Chloe, but Grace remembered. Or that weekend when Grace had traveled unexpectedly, and Michael, oddly enough, had seemed distracted. But she'd brushed it all aside, because trust, once given fully, doesn't like to be questioned. Now, she wished she had paid attention. But 3 nights ago, all the signs had crystallized in a way that could never be unseen. 3 nights ago, trust stopped being blind and became something else. Something cold. Something that would not let her walk down the aisle. It was supposed to be one last night of laughter. Grace had come over with her favorite things: strawberry soda, jollof rice from their go-to takeout spot, and a box of White Rose cupcakes with little M and C tags stuck in the icing. They sat on the floor of Chloe's apartment, their legs stretched out, still in their jeans and headscarves, laughing about how chaotic the bridal shower had been. "You're going to make the most stunning bride," Grace had said, pulling Chloe into a sudden hug. "You deserve all of this." Chloe had smiled, resting her head on Grace's shoulder. "Thank you. I'm glad you're here." They talked late into the night. Her mother had tried to calling, but she ignored it. She wanted the world outside to pause, just for one night, one last uncomplicated memory. When Grace said she needed to use the bathroom, she left her phone behind on the floor, screen side up. Chloe didn't mean to snoop. She didn't even think about it until her own phone buzzed low battery, and she reached out to use Grace's charger, tangled beside the sofa. Her fingers grazed the screen accidentally, and it lit up. What she saw was not curiosity. It was clarity. A message thread. At the top, Michael. My Michael. The emoji made her throat tighten. She didn't mean to open it, but her thumb, betraying her just as cleanly as they had, tapped the thread. What followed unraveled her chest one line at a time. "I miss your laugh. She doesn't laugh like you. You know, I wish this wasn't happening. You should have been the one." And Grace's response, "You don't mean that. Stop texting me tonight. It's hard enough." Chloe froze. The air around her felt thinner, like the room had been vacuum sealed. Her heartbeat was slow and loud. She read the messages again and again, hoping the screen would correct itself, hoping she misunderstood, but the words didn't change. The dates were recent. The timing matched that business trip Michael took 2 weeks ago. Her fingers trembled. She heard the toilet flush. Grace's slippers moved across the floor towards the living room. The phone was still in Chloe's hand. Grace entered the room, her face bright, and then she saw the screen. Everything in her expression died in one breath. She didn't ask what Chloe was doing. She didn't reach for the phone. She didn't say it was a joke. She just stood there, frozen. Then, in the softest voice Chloe had ever heard from her, Grace said, "I'm sorry. It wasn't supposed to go this far." Chloe blinked. Her throat was thick with something she didn't have the words for yet. She slowly placed the phone on the table beside the cupcakes. One of them had fallen sideways, crushing the little M&C tag beneath the icing. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't ask why. She just stood, walked past Grace, and entered the bedroom. And for the rest of the night, they slept in silence, on opposite ends of the apartment, like strangers who had shared a dream and woken up from very different versions of it. The days that followed moved like watercolor, soft, slow, and just slightly out of focus. Chloe never spoke of what she had seen, not to her parents, not even to Grace, not beyond the silence that followed Grace's quiet apology. And really, what more could be said? The truth, once seen, didn't need to be explained. It simply sat in the room like dust, settling over everything. Every smile, every plan, every dress fitting, every prayer reading. And still, the world kept spinning. The wedding planner sent her daily check-ins, cheerful and oblivious. Final walkthrough tomorrow, eek! So excited for you, Queen. Michael's mother called to say how proud she was of the woman of grace and faith her son was about to marry. Her uncle from Gama had already landed and was staying in Lekki. Her aunt from Abuja sent a pair of gold bridal shoes and a note, "To carry you into your destiny, my dear." Destiny. That word scratched at her. The first day, Chloe barely got out of bed. She sat on the edge for an hour, still in her nightgown, hair half loosened from the previous day's styling. She looked at her phone for a long time before finally switching it off. She prayed, quietly, just a whisper. She couldn't even form full thoughts, only names. God, Grace, Michael, me, help. That was all she could manage. The second day, she called in sick to her bridesmaid brunch. No one questioned it. Everyone assumed it was last-minute nerves. Grace sent a text. "I know you're not okay, but I'm sorry, and I love you." Chloe didn't reply. Not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. Some love, she realized, is too costly to hold on to. The third day, she stared at her gown for almost an hour. It was hanging behind her door, pressed and perfect. She touched the fabric. It was beautiful, heavy, real. But it didn't feel like hers anymore. She felt like a guest in her own life. She'd expected heartbreak to feel more dramatic, weeping, collapsing, breaking things. But this pain was quiet, cold. It lived in her throat. It showed up in the way she hesitated before speaking, in the way she looked at things and didn't really see them. She journaled instead of crying. She wrote, "I'm afraid of making a scene, but I'm more afraid of staying silent forever. How do you bury a wedding without grieving a future? What do you call love that's loyal in public, but slippery in private?" The words helped. So did the prayer. It was still wordless, but it shifted. She played soft worship music and just sat with God. Sometimes she spoke aloud. Sometimes she just breathed. One night she sat by the window and whispered, "Lord, if this is what I think it is, give me the strength to walk away with dignity. Let me not return to what doesn't carry your peace." The peace came slowly, like morning fog. Not loud, not definitive, but present, enough to think clearly. And that's when she knew. She didn't have to fight. She didn't have to confront. She didn't have to expose. She simply had to choose. Choose her peace, choose her future, choose the version of herself who didn't need a veil to prove her worth. On the evening before the wedding, her mother came into her room, smiling and holding a small velvet pouch. She said, "I found them.
The earrings from Auntie Remy's old collection, the ones you said you reminded you of Grandma?" Chloe smiled and took them gently from her hands. "Thank you, Mum. They're beautiful." And they were. But they no longer belonged to the woman standing in that room. Later that night, she cleared her desk. She lit a candle, took out a sheet of ivory stationery. Her handwriting was steady, neat. "I choose peace over betrayal. I cannot marry Michael. Please inform the guests kindly." She read it twice, folded it once, slipped it into an envelope, wrote the priest's name across the front. She placed it in her wedding clutch, along with her lipstick, a mirror, a packet of tissues, and a small wooden cross her father had carved for her when she was 13. Then she pulled the gown from the hanger and laid it across the bed. She smoothed the sleeves, adjusted the hem. She stared at it for a long moment, not with longing, but with finality. And then she turned off the lights, climbed into bed, and slept like someone who had already left.
The sun rose slowly, as though it reluctantly intruding. Its light filtered through gauzy curtains, casting warm gold across Chloe's bedroom wall. The clock ticked softly, its hands marking the beginning of what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. She sat still at the edge of her bed, fully dressed. The dress had been zipped up an hour ago by her mother, who had clasped her hands together and whispered, "You look like a dream, my darling." Chloe had smiled, hugged her, and said thank you. She hadn't lied. She did look like a dream, but it wasn't hers anymore. Her gown was exquisite, hand-stitched with gold thread leaves around the bodice, the skirt flowing like water across the floor. Her veil, light and sheer, floated gently every time she moved. Her face was soft, flawless. The makeup artist had called her goddess-level beautiful. No one could have guessed what she was planning. And maybe that was the hardest part. Walking through the motions, knowing the ending no one else could see. The house buzzed around her. Aunties came and went. Her cousin played gospel music on a small Bluetooth speaker. A young flower girl with cornrows tiptoed in and whispered, "You look like a princess," before running off giggling. Chloe simply smiled. Every time. She said thank you. She posed for the phone cameras. She nodded when someone asked, "Are you ready?" And yes, she was, but not in the way they meant. Her mother entered with a small plate of toast and tea. "You must eat something, love." She took the toast, broke off a piece. "Thank you, Mom." "You're sure you don't want to review your vows again? You left them on the desk." "No, I'm okay." Her mother smiled proudly. "Your father would have been so proud of you. You've carried yourself like a woman of God, full of grace." Chloe swallowed the dry toast. It stuck briefly in her throat, but she nodded. "Thank you." Minutes later, the driver arrived. The ride to the church felt like a dream inside a bubble. People waved at the car. Two of her aunties trailed behind in another vehicle, giddy with excitement. The church loomed closer with every turn, its steeple tall, white ribbons flapping in the breeze. As the car slowed, Chloe's heart didn't race. Instead, a strange calmness settled on her, like peace had taken her hand and whispered, "I'll walk with you." When she stepped out, phones clicked instantly. A few guests were already taking selfies. The choir's rehearsal echoed faintly through the stone halls. Someone began to clap. A woman nearby gasped, see beauty now. This bride fine die." She smiled and nodded.
Her face didn't betray her. Inside, the church atmosphere vibrated with celebration. Ushers adjusted flower vases. The priest was reviewing the order of service with the musicians. The videographer followed her gently, capturing her every move. At the door to the bridal suite, the photographer leaned in. "You look incredible, like magazine cover incredible." She said thank you. Inside the suite, she sat down quietly. The room was painted ivory, with a mirror trimmed in gold. Her bouquet sat on a velvet stool. Her clutch rested beside it. Inside, the envelope waited. She closed her eyes. 10 minutes. She could hear everything. The final tuning of the violin, the rustle of guests settling in their seats, a murmur of voices, someone tapping a microphone, the deep voice of Michael's uncle joking loudly in the front row. A knock came to the door. She opened it. Reverend Tunde stood there in his white robe, his hands behind his back. He looked relieved to see her. "Ah, Sister Chloe, everyone is in place. You look radiant." Chloe smiled gently. "Before we begin, I have something for you." She opened her clutch and took out the envelope. He received it, confused. "What is this?" She looked him in the eye. "Please read it now." He slipped the letter open, scanned the page. The silence that followed was the kind you don't teach in seminary. His brows furrowed slightly, then relaxed. He looked up again. "Are you sure?" "I am," she said, steady. He nodded slowly. "Do you want to speak to the congregation yourself?" "No. Let the letter speak. I'll be gone before it's read." He hesitated. "Would you like someone to escort you?" She shook her head. "No need. I know the way out." She placed her bouquet back on the table, adjusted her veil, and walked toward the side exit. The air in the corridor was cool, still. She could hear the music swelling behind her. The choir had started their first hymn. Someone was announcing the arrival of the bride. She kept walking. The soft soles of her shoes padded gently along the marble. Her train swept behind her like a wave of silk. She passed an open door, caught a glimpse of a child adjusting a tie, a grandmother fanning herself. None of them saw her. At the final door, a breeze greeted her. She stepped outside into the light. The sun was warm now, fully risen. The sky was soft and endless. The street was quiet on this side of the building, far from the laughter and selfies and questions. She turned just for a moment and looked back at the church, and then she walked forward. No tears, no dramatics, just a quiet woman in an ivory gown walking away from what everyone else assumed was her dream. And as she walked, her hands relaxed, her shoulders dropped, and her soul finally exhaled. Weddings make noise, but silence always comes after. When Chloe left, she didn't slam doors, she didn't make a speech, she didn't weep in the middle of the aisle. She exited quietly, but the silence she left behind roared louder than any scandal. People talk when things don't go as planned. The group chats lit up before the choir had even stopped singing. Did you hear what happened? She wrote a letter? Was she threatened? Was it grace? By the sunset, the hashtags had begun. Hashtag runaway bride. Hashtag silent exit. Hashtag when love isn't enough.
Everyone had a theory. No one had the truth. Michael never said a word publicly. Not to the press, not to his family, not even to his closest friends. He simply returned the bride price through his father, left the honeymoon tickets unused, and told people, "Let's just move on." Grace moved out of her apartment within a week. No one heard from her, either. But Chloe, she wasn't hiding. She was just gone. Gone from the photos, gone from the calls, gone from the expectations. She booked a one-way ticket to Savannah, Georgia, using her full name but with no forwarding address. It was a quiet southern city with historic streets and slow mornings. She told only one person, her aunt. It was an 8-hour flight, followed by a silent cab ride, as the driver pulled into the narrow, oak-shaded driveway of her aunt's cottage. Spanish moss, Kulga hummed like background music. Everything was soft, still. Her aunt opened the door with sleepy eyes and a warm hug. "You don't have to explain anything, baby girl," she whispered. And Chloe didn't. The next morning, Savannah sunlight streamed through white curtains. Chloe woke to birdsong and the smell of cinnamon tea. She had no schedule, no phone calls, no questions, just space. She unpacked slowly, only brought 2 dresses, 1 sweater, 3 books, her journal, and a small wooden cross her father once gave her. She left the wedding gown behind, not out of anger, just release. The first few days passed in silence. She slept. She walked the garden. She cried. Not for Michael, but for the pressure, the weight, the version of herself that had tried too hard to be perfect. One evening she took a walk to the riverside. Tourists laughed around her. Children ran past chasing bubbles. She stood at the edge of the dock and stared at the water. Her reflection rippled, and for once, she didn't look away. She realized the world hadn't ended. She had thought it would. She had thought walking away would mean disgrace, shame, isolation. But what she found instead was breath, room, stillness, and eventually, joy. By the second week, she had a routine. She woke early, made tea, and sat on the porch with her journal. Her hair began to return to its natural texture. Her smile, too. She blocked Michael. She archived Grace. She turned off her Nigerian number and bought a local SIM, just in case. Sometimes she missed things. Not people, but moments. The Sunday brunches, the group prayers, the playlists they had curated together. But nostalgia, she found, wasn't always a reason to go back. One afternoon, she and her aunt sat on the porch peeling peaches. Her aunt didn't ask questions, but she said something that lingered. There are women who wear the crowns others hand them, and then there are women who forge their own, from silence, from clarity, from fire. You, Chloe, are the second kind. That night, Chloe wrote a journal entry that felt like a declaration. I didn't walk away because I was afraid to love. I walked away because I refused to be loved the wrong way. She didn't know how long she'd stay in Savannah, but she had started dreaming again. She drafted a short story, not about herself, but close enough. A woman walks away from a public wedding into a quiet forest town and learns how to be whole. She sent it to an old mentor who ran a small online journal. He called her the next day. "This is stunning," he said. "Are you writing again?" She smiled. A real one. "Yes, I think I am." 6 months had passed since the letter. Savannah was now in full bloom. Jasmine trailing from the porch rails, the riverboats humming again, and the streets lined with tourists clutching sweet tea. The quiet had become familiar, not haunting. Chloe now moved through the town like someone who belonged, not hiding, not explaining, just living. She worked remotely as an editor for a small publishing house, sipping coffee at a corner cafe every morning before opening her laptop. Her words had returned, not all at once, but enough to stitch together meaning again. She wrote articles under a pen name. Fiction, mostly. Sometimes poetry, always honest. One rainy Thursday, she received an email from her old pastor in Lagos. "We've never stopped praying for you. People talk, yes, but time reveals truth. Your silence was not weakness. We just wish we had asked more questions before assuming answers." She didn't reply immediately, but she saved the email. Later that night, she sat by the window, rain gently tapping the glass, her journal open in her lap. She began to write. "Dear Grace, I forgive you. Not because what happened was small, but because carrying it with me was too heavy for the road I now walk. You broke something, yes, but God used the break to rebuild me." She sealed it, but didn't send it. Some letters are for closure, not for delivery. Chloe began teaching a small writing workshop at the local community center. It wasn't big, just a few women with notebooks and hard stories, but it mattered. She titled the course, "Words That Walk Away." The women laughed. They cried. They wrote. And one afternoon, as the class ended, a quiet girl stayed behind. "Your story," she said, "the one on the online journal, was it you?" Chloe looked at her and smiled. "All my stories are me, and none of them are," she said gently. "But if it helped you, then yes, it was." The girl nodded. It helped. That night, Chloe stood by the river again, barefoot on the wooden dock. The stars blinked quietly above. She closed her eyes. No music, no aisle, no crowd. Just her, God, and the sound of peace. She didn't need applause. She didn't need vindication. She had made the hardest decision of her life and found herself waiting on the other side. Some stories don't end with wedding bells. Some end with a woman choosing herself, quietly, fully, without shame. If you've ever walked away from something others thought you should keep, I see you. And I want you to know, healing is real. Wholeness is possible. And silence, sometimes that's where the miracle begins. Tell me, what would you have done if you were Chloe? Don't forget to like, share, and follow for more true life stories reimagined. This was Confessions Reimagined. Until next time, stay whole.